The route board turned red before sunrise. Then dispatch realized 77 drivers no longer answered to Redline. Corporate litigation was not supposed to start on a dispatch floor at 6:12 in the morning. It was supposed to start in conference rooms, with lawyers, binders, and people pretending surprise. But at Redline Meridian Logistics in Memphis, Tennessee, it started with ringing phones, empty driver assignments, and a vice president staring at a screen he could not fix. 24 Northstar Biosystems loads sat unassigned. Vaccine coolers, insulin pallets, lab samples, medical devices bound for hospitals across Tennessee, Missouri, Arkansas, Georgia, and Texas. Every load needed a refrigerated trailer. Every trailer needed a driver. Every driver had a name Preston Walsh never bothered to learn. My name is Marcus Thorne. I am 44 years old. Until 6 months earlier, I ran dispatch and driver operations at Redline Meridian. I knew every Northstar lane from Memphis to Dallas. I knew the bad docks, the tight turns, the safe truck stops, and the hospital receivers who answered after midnight. I knew which drivers could handle Atlanta traffic. I knew who hated crossing the Mississippi River Bridge in high wind. I knew who checked reefer temperatures twice without being asked. Preston called that personality dependency. I called it the job. That morning, I sat in my pickup across from the yard, outside the fence near Lamar Avenue. Gas station coffee steamed in the cup holder. My old badge was clipped to the visor, useless now. Through the chain link, I could see the dispatch windows glowing over the lot. Trucks idled under sodium lights. Yard dogs moved trailers like chess pieces. Inside, the board kept bleeding red. A dispatcher I trained texted me one line. Northstar is asking why 77 drivers are unavailable. I did not smile. Not yet. People think revenge feels loud. It does not. Sometimes it feels like watching a bad system finally read its own report. If you have ever been humiliated by a boss who confused fear with leadership, keep listening. Because Preston thought he fired a manager, he had actually fired the bridge between Redline and the people who moved its freight. 6 months earlier, he stood on that dispatch floor and made a show of it. Drivers by the coffee machine, dispatchers under headsets, safety coordinators holding clipboards, account managers pretending not to stare. Preston said Redline needed leaders who followed direction. Then he called me a cultural bottleneck in front of everyone. Human Resources handed me a folder. Security waited by the glass door. I asked one question before I signed the receipt. Did legal review removing the Northstar Escalation Authority before renewal week? Preston laughed like the answer did not matter. Contracts follow companies, Marcus, not employees. That sentence lived rent-free in my head for half a year. Now Northstar was on line 3. Preston was inside, trying to assign routes to drivers who no longer worked for him. And 77 people who had heard him say it remembered exactly who he was. Long before Preston Walsh turned my job into a public lesson, I learned freight from the driver's seat. I was 23, hauling dry van loads between Memphis and Dallas for a carrier that paid late and apologized early. Back then, dispatchers were voices through cheap speakers. Some knew the road. Most knew the software. You can tell the difference by how they talk during trouble. A good dispatcher asks where you are, how much clock you have, and what the weather looks like. A bad one asks why you are not there yet. I promised myself I would never become the second kind. By 44, I had spent 21 years in trucking operations. Long haul first, then night dispatch, then route recovery, then cold chain medical freight, where one wrong temperature reading can ruin a shipment worth more than a house. Redline moved vaccines, insulin, biologics, lab kits, and surgical devices through Memphis International Airport and across Interstate 40. That freight did not forgive sloppy planning. Every cold chain load carried cargo liability coverage because one failed recorder could trigger a 7-figure claim. A trailer could look perfect from the outside and still be writing your lawsuit inside the temperature log. That was why I checked chain of custody, reefer set points, fuel levels, driver qualification files, and hours of service windows before breakfast. Preston called that old school. I called it Tuesday. I lived in Bartlett, about 20 minutes from the yard when traffic behaved. Most mornings, I drove down Summer Avenue before sunrise, then cut toward the terminal while Memphis still smelled like coffee and diesel. The city has its own rhythm before dawn. Beale Street is quiet. The river is dark. The warehouse lights near Lamar Avenue look like a second skyline. Drivers notice those things. Office people do not. That difference matters in logistics. I knew which truck stops felt safe after midnight. I knew which dock supervisor in Nashville would hold a door for a medical load. I knew which St. Louis receiver required paperwork in a plastic sleeve. I knew who could run Memphis to Atlanta without burning clock. That knowledge never showed cleanly in a spreadsheet. It showed in loads arriving cold, sealed, documented, and on time. Northstar Biosystems paid Redline because we protected their promises. Their contract required strict service-level performance. Late hospital deliveries triggered penalties. Temperature excursions triggered investigation. Broken chain of custody triggered escalation. I once warned Redline that falsified recovery notes could become a breach of contract claim. Preston later called that dramatic. The legal department called me twice afterward. Drivers trusted me because I had slept in the same cabs. I knew a missed layover payment could ruin a week. I knew fatigue reports were not complaints. They were warnings. I knew a driver who says something feels off is usually telling you something valuable. That was the part Preston never learned. He thought dispatch controlled drivers. It does not. Dispatch earns cooperation one honest decision at a time. Redline's board saw 77 trucks on a capacity sheet. I saw 77 families, 77 clocks, 77 reasons the freight either moved or did not. That was the difference between me and Preston. He managed numbers. I managed trust. By the time Northstar Biosystems renewed for the 4th year, Redline's executives thought the account was automatic. That is how companies lose things. They mistake repetition for loyalty. Northstar was never automatic. It was earned every morning before sunrise. Their freight moved through hospital networks, specialty pharmacies, research labs, and regional distribution hubs. Some loads had 4-hour delivery windows. Some required receiver signatures from people wearing gloves in controlled rooms. Some could not sit on a dock longer than 15 minutes without triggering escalation. I built the system that kept those details from becoming lawsuits. We had a cold chain escalation board with color codes drivers actually understood. Green meant normal monitoring. Yellow meant watch the reefer and call dispatch within 30 minutes. Red meant stop pretending and wake me up. I answered those calls at 2 o'clock in the morning from my kitchen in Bartlett. My wife could tell by my voice whether it was weather, equipment, or a receiver problem. She never complained. She knew quiet freight paid loud bills. Redline's on-time performance under my team stayed above 98% for 3 years. Temperature excursions dropped by almost half. Driver turnover on Northstar Lane stayed low because I did not treat drivers like replaceable truck numbers. I matched routes to people. Carl could handle Dallas because he knew the distribution center guard by name. Denise owned the Atlanta lane because she planned fuel stops like a surgeon. Victor hated St. Louis winter runs, so I stopped assigning them unless he volunteered. That was not favoritism. That was operational memory. Preston saw it as inefficiency. He walked into Redline with consultant confidence and started asking why certain drivers received preferred lanes. I told him because they earned them. He asked why fatigue reports slowed route assignment. I told him because federal hours of service rules were not suggestions. He asked why dispatchers called me before denying safety delays. I told him because I had spent years proving I would back them. He nodded like he was listening. Men like Preston use nodding as camouflage. The first thing he cut was layover pay review. Then he challenged detention approvals. Then he pushed automatic route compression on lanes that already ran tight. The software loved it. Drivers did not. Neither did physics. A reefer trailer stuck behind construction near Little Rock cannot become faster because someone changed a dashboard color. I documented everything. Missed rest opportunities. Receiver delays. Temperature recorder faults. Driver complaints. Payroll disputes. I sent weekly memos up the chain with clean language and ugly numbers. Preston replied with phrases like margin discipline and cultural alignment. One Friday, Northstar's procurement director called me directly. Her name was Elaine Porter. She did not waste words. "Marcus," she said, "are your people being pressured to change recovery notes after delays?" I looked at the route board. Then I looked at Preston's office glass. I told her Redline's policy required accurate temperature and custody documentation. She paused. That was not what I asked. I said I know. That was the moment I understood the account was already watching. Preston still thought he was tightening operations. Northstar was quietly measuring whether Redline could still be trusted. Preston Walsh did not start by attacking drivers. He started by calling them capacity. That was cleaner. Capacity sounded measurable, flexible, and obedient. Drivers sounded human, which made his plan harder to sell. He arrived at Redline from a distribution consulting firm in Chicago. The board liked him because he could make old problems look modern. His first presentation had a title so polished it barely meant anything. Network Efficiency Through Behavioral Alignment. I remember that because every dangerous corporate idea starts with words nobody at the loading dock would use. Preston stood in the training room near the dispatch floor, clicking through slides. He had perfect hair, a slim laptop, and shoes too clean for a trucking terminal. Behind him, the route board flashed live loads to Nashville, Dallas, St. Louis, and Atlanta. He never turned around to look at it. That told me plenty. He wanted to increase margin before North Star's renewal review. His plan looked simple on paper. Reduce layover approvals. Tighten delivery buffers. Limit manual safety delays. Push more driver coaching through dispatch. On a spreadsheet, it gained 6 points of utilization. On Interstate 40 during a storm, it gained claims. I said that in the meeting. Not loudly. Loud makes executives feel attacked. I used the tone drivers use when warning about black ice. Calm, plain, and hard to ignore. Preston smiled like I had just proved his point. Marcus, he said, you are very protective of the driver group. I said somebody should be. The dispatchers went still. Preston clicked to another slide. He called my route exceptions informal tribal knowledge. He called driver fatigue reports subjective friction. He called North Star escalation calls relationship overhead. 3 phrases. 3 warnings. Elaine Porter from North Star had already asked about recovery notes. Safety had already flagged rising complaints. Payroll had already missed 2 layover adjustments. Preston saw none of that as risk. He saw me as the only person saying no in complete sentences. By April, he began moving around me. Dispatchers were told to copy his office before approving delay pay. Account managers were told to keep client communications executive aligned. Safety coordinators were told to route fatigue concerns through an efficiency review. That one made my jaw tighten. Fatigue is not an efficiency issue. It is a compliance issue with wheels. I sent another memo. Hours of service risk. Temperature recovery documentation. Driver retention concerns. Potential service level agreement exposure. Preston forwarded it to Human Resources with one line. Marcus continues resisting operational transformation. Human Resources accidentally left me copied. People think villains need secret rooms. Most just misuse email. The next week, Preston scheduled a Monday all hands on the dispatch floor. Not in a conference room. Not on a video call. Right where drivers checked route packets and dispatchers wore headsets. He wanted witnesses. He thought that would make me smaller. That was his mistake. Because the room he chose was not just a room. It was a ledger. Every driver in it had watched me answer bad weather calls. Every dispatcher had watched me protect honest notes. Every safety coordinator knew which memos Preston ignored. When he stepped onto that floor with Human Resources behind him, he thought the consequence would stop at my badge. It was already much bigger than that. The account was watching. The drivers were listening. And every red flag he buried had learned where to surface. The all-hands started at 9:05 on a Monday, which told me Preston wanted maximum damage. Monday mornings belonged to dispatch. Route changes. Late weekend paperwork. Drivers coming off home time. Receivers asking why appointment windows shifted. Anyone who schedules a leadership speech then either understands nothing or understands exactly too much. Preston understood the optics. He stood between the route board and the coffee station, right where nobody could avoid him. Human Resources waited beside him with a folder. Security stood near the glass door, trying to look invisible and failing. Dispatchers kept one ear in their headsets. Drivers leaned against counters with folded paperwork. The North Star account team stood near the printer. Everybody knew something was wrong before Preston opened his mouth. He started with appreciation. Executives always do. He thanked the team for resilience, adaptability, and commitment to Redline's future. Then he said the company needed leaders aligned with operational direction. I looked at the route board behind him. 3 Nashville loads. 2 Dallas recoveries. 1 St. Louis appointment already tight. Real work waited while Preston performed management. He turned toward me like a magician revealing a card. Marcus has served this company for many years, he said. Served. Past tense always arrives early. But our next phase requires less emotional attachment and more disciplined execution. A driver named Denise lowered her coffee cup. Carl from Dallas Lane stopped chewing gum. My lead dispatcher, Anita, went completely still. Preston continued. Effective immediately, Marcus will be separated from Redline Meridian Logistics. He has become a cultural bottleneck. There it was. Public. Polished. Cowardly. Human Resources stepped forward with the folder. I did not reach for it right away. I looked around the room first. Not for sympathy. For memory. Drivers remember who humiliates people before breakfast. Dispatchers remember who uses them as scenery. Preston gave me the smile of a man expecting anger. I gave him a question. Did legal review removing the North Star Escalation Authority during renewal week? The room changed. Not loudly. Just enough. The North Star account manager looked at Preston. Anita looked at the compliance desk. Human Resources looked at the folder. Preston laughed once. Contracts follow companies, Marcus. Not employees. I nodded. Then I took the folder. Severance. Benefits continuation. Non-disparagement. Company property return. Standard language for a non-standard mistake. I signed the receipt, not agreement. Then I wrote received only beside my name. Human Resources noticed. Preston did too. Always documenting, he said. I said nothing. The best answer to arrogance is a clean record. Security asked for my badge. I unclipped it slowly and placed it on the counter. Same counter where drivers signed out route packets every morning. Denise looked at the badge. Then at Preston. Carl shook his head once. Small movement. Big meaning. I picked up my personal notebook from my desk. Preston tried to stop me. Company materials stay here. This is my notebook, I said. Driver birthdays. Safe stop notes. Route preferences. Things your software never learned. He smiled thinly. We will manage. I believed him. That was the sad part. He would manage everything except trust. I walked past the coffee station, past the route board, past 77 people who had heard every word. Nobody cheered. Nobody made a scene. That would have cheapened it. They watched. Witnesses do not need volume. Outside, Memphis heat was already rising off the asphalt. I put the folder on my passenger seat and drove toward Bartlett. My phone buzzed before I reached Interstate 240. One text, then 3, then 11, all from drivers. I did not answer with speeches. I sent the same sentence every time. Finish your assigned load safely. After that, make your own decision. I spent the first 30 days saying less than people expected. That irritated Preston more than any speech could have. He wanted proof I had organized something. A group message. A secret meeting. A stolen driver list. Anything he could hand to legal and call sabotage. I gave him nothing. Drivers called me. I told them the same thing every time. Finish your assigned load safely. Read your agreements. Talk to your families. Make your own decision. Some were company drivers. Some were independent contractors. Some had renewal paperwork coming due. None needed me to explain what they had seen. Redline had done that on the dispatch floor. 18 drivers resigned in the first 2 weeks. Not mid-route. Not during active delivery. Proper notice. Clean equipment return. Final logs submitted. 24 more refused the new compressed route terms. 35 independent contractors declined renewal within the month. That was 77 total, but not because I took them. Redline had spent months teaching them how little they mattered. I just stopped arguing on Redline's behalf. Preston tried replacing them fast. Recruiting ads went up before my severance check cleared. Sign-on bonuses. Weekend orientations. Promises about flexible lanes. None of that fixed trust. Cold chain drivers are not interchangeable bodies and seats. They know reefer units. They know receiver behavior. They know when a route plan was written by someone who has never hunted parking after midnight. Dispatch turnover followed. Anita left first. Then 2 night dispatchers. Then a safety coordinator who had been documenting fatigue complaints. Redline still had trucks. Redline still had software. Redline still had Preston saying capacity will normalize by quarter end. What it did not have was operational memory. North Star felt that first. A Nashville hospital delivery missed its window by 48 minutes. Then a St. Louis lab shipment required temperature investigation after a delayed yard move. Then an Atlanta biologics load needed recovery routing because a new dispatcher misread a receiver cutoff. Each issue had an explanation. Explanations do not protect contracts forever. I kept my head down in Bartlett. I opened Blue Ridge Medical Freight with 2 leased tractors, 3 refrigerated trailers, and a folding desk in a warehouse near Summer Avenue. It was not impressive. That was fine. Impressive gets expensive before it gets reliable. I built the company around what Redline stopped respecting. Driver first scheduling. Honest temperature reporting. Clean chain of custody. No fake recovery notes. No punishment for fatigue calls. No dispatchers forced to lie with polite language. Every driver who joined Blue Ridge signed clean paperwork. No stolen files. No copied customer lists. No redline equipment. No nonsense. My attorney reviewed every onboarding packet. She was not cheap. Neither was peace of mind. 6 months after my firing, Elaine Porter from North Star called my personal cell. Her voice had the same controlled edge from before. "Marcus," she said, "did you start a carrier?" I looked at our 3 trailers through the warehouse window. "Blue Ridge Medical Freight," I said. "Small, clean, and honest." She paused. "Good. Because Redline just missed another cure milestone." Elaine Porter did not call because she liked me. That was important. Procurement people do not move $92 million because someone was nice on the phone. They move money when performance data starts telling the same story as their complaints. North Star had given Redline a cure period after the 3rd service miss. 30 days to restore on-time performance. 30 days to correct temperature recovery documentation. 30 days to stabilize driver coverage on critical lanes. Preston treated it like a warning letter. Elaine treated it like a timer. By the 6th month after I left, Redline had missed 2 more hospital network deliveries. One was in Nashville. One was outside Little Rock. Neither ruined product, but both triggered deviation reports. That matters in medical freight. A deviation report is not a complaint. It is a breadcrumb for lawyers. North Star also had 3 temperature excursion disputes under review. 2 chain of custody gaps. Driver turnover above 60% on former Redline priority lanes. Insurance renewal questions that made their risk department nervous. Elaine did not need my opinion. She had numbers. Still, she asked one question before ending the call. If North Star released a limited request for proposal, could Blue Ridge respond? I looked around my warehouse. 3 trailers. 2 tractors. 1 folding desk. A whiteboard covered in lanes we could handle without lying. Not the whole network, I said. Not yet. But give me the lanes where Redline is failing hardest. I will prove what clean looks like. She was quiet for 3 seconds. That answer probably helped more than confidence would have. The request arrived 9 days later. 12 lanes. Memphis to Nashville. Memphis to St. Louis. Memphis to Atlanta. Memphis to Dallas. Medical distribution only. 90-day pilot. 0 tolerance for falsified temperature recovery. Strict service level agreement reporting. Full driver qualification file audit before award. Redline thought it was routine benchmarking. Preston even sent a cheerful email to North Star about competitive validation. Anita forwarded it to me later from her new Blue Ridge account. No comment. Just the email. Some documents are jokes without punchlines. I did not use Redline files. I did not need them. Lane knowledge is not theft when you earned it behind a windshield and a headset. The drivers who joined Blue Ridge signed consent forms for their own experience records. We built our bid from clean data. Safety scores, insurance certificates, temperature monitoring protocol, chain of custody process, driver retention plan, route recovery matrix. Elaine's team asked why our proposal had fewer lanes than requested expansion capacity. I told the truth. Because we only bid what we can run cold and on time. That sentence became the center of our presentation. North Star remembered a different kind of truth from Redline. They had saved escalation emails I sent months before I was fired. Not because I asked. Because clients save warnings when vendors later pretend surprise. One email showed I flagged fatigue risk on the Dallas lane. Another showed I warned against changing recovery notes after reefer alarms. A third showed I asked management to review service level exposure before renewal week. Preston thought he had fired a bottleneck. North Star had preserved a record of the only person trying to protect their contract. The pilot started in August. 90 days. 12 lanes. 56 drivers available by rotation. Every temperature report submitted on time. Every chain of custody packet complete. 1 Nashville delay recovered legally through a backup driver. 1 Atlanta dock issue escalated before product sat exposed. No drama. No excuses. At the end, Elaine called again. This time, her voice was lighter. "Marcus," she said, "I need you in Memphis next Friday. Legal has one question for you." I already knew what it was. They wanted to know who had actually kept them compliant before Preston decided compliance was emotional. North Star's legal review happened in a glass conference room near Memphis International Airport. Not downtown. Not fancy. Just close to the freight that mattered. Elaine Porter sat at one end with two attorneys, one risk manager, and a procurement director from Chicago. I sat at the other with my attorney and a binder, so clean it almost felt rude. Blue Ridge was still small. That helped me. Small companies cannot hide behind departments. Every answer has a name. The first attorney asked about capacity. I gave him tractors, trailers, driver rotation, backup coverage, and lane limits. The second asked about compliance. I gave her driver qualification files, temperature monitoring, chain of custody, and hours of service controls. The risk manager asked about cargo claims. I gave him our prevention protocol and insurance certificates. Nobody asked about revenge. Serious money does not care about feelings. Then Elaine opened a separate folder. Redline's cure period results were inside. On-time performance below contract threshold. Temperature documentation disputes still open. Driver turnover above 60%. Corrective action plans revised 3 times. Service recovery notes inconsistent across dispatch teams. Every page sounded like a company explaining itself into a corner. My attorney slid our 90-day pilot report across the table. 98.7% on time. 0 unresolved temperature excursions. Full chain of custody packet completion. No late recovery notes. No driver qualification file exceptions. The room stayed quiet for longer than necessary. That is usually when numbers are doing their work. The Chicago procurement director leaned back. "Marcus," she said, "why should we believe Blue Ridge can scale?" I had expected that. I did not give her a speech. "Because we will not scale faster than compliance can follow," I said. "We will add lanes only after drivers, equipment, insurance, and dispatch coverage are documented." That answer cost me volume. It won me trust. Elaine nodded once, like she had heard the sentence she was waiting for. Then the first attorney asked the question Preston never saw coming. "During your time at Redline, who held day-to-day escalation authority for Northstar's cold chain account?" My attorney shifted slightly. I answered carefully. "I did." "Who reviewed temperature recovery notes?" "I did, with safety and dispatch support." "Who maintained driver continuity on priority lanes?" "I did." "Who warned management about service level exposure before renewal week?" "I did, in writing." The attorney placed 3 printed emails on the table. My old subject line stared back at me. Northstar escalation risk. Temperature recovery documentation concern. Renewal week authority transition warning. I had not supplied those emails. Northstar had kept them. Elaine looked at me. "We received these before you were terminated." I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the cleanest signature. Then she placed one final document beside them. Redline had sent Northstar a certification after my termination. It claimed no material operational leadership change affected the account. My name was nowhere on it. Preston had signed it. That paper changed the room. Not because it gave Blue Ridge the contract automatically. It did something colder. It showed Northstar that Redline had not merely lost people. It had misrepresented the loss. Elaine closed the folder. "We are terminating the cure period review," she said. "Blue Ridge will receive final award recommendation pending board approval." My attorney wrote one note. I looked through the glass toward a row of refrigerated trailers outside. Freight kept moving. It always does. The question is whether it moves honestly. Before we left, Elaine stopped me near the door. "Preston called this morning," she said. "He offered a discount." I asked what she told him. She almost smiled. "I told him price does not fix chain of custody." 2 days later, Redline filed an emergency injunction request to stop the award. That was their final turn. They thought court would save the contract. Instead, Discovery opened the file. Redline's injunction request landed in Shelby County Chancery Court on a Tuesday morning. Preston thought the word injunction sounded powerful. He forgot courts asked for documents. Redline claimed Blue Ridge interfered with its contract, poached drivers, and exploited confidential knowledge. My attorney read the filing, then looked at me across her conference table. She smiled once. Not friendly. Surgical. "They are about to discover their own emails," she said. Expedited discovery took 6 weeks. It did not save Redline. It opened every drawer Preston had hoped stayed closed. Internal memos showed driver complaints ignored before I left. Payroll records showed layover disputes rising for months. Safety emails showed fatigue reports reclassified as coaching opportunities. Northstar escalation warnings sat unanswered in Preston's inbox. My old memos were there too. Dates, lane numbers, service level risks, temperature documentation concerns. Clean language. Ugly pattern. Then came the certification Preston signed after my termination. No material operational leadership change affected the account. That sentence became the hinge. Northstar's lawyers asked how Redline could certify no material change while losing the person listed on prior escalation records. Redline had no clean answer. Preston tried blaming human resources. Human resources blamed operations. Operations blamed transition timing. Blame is what weak systems use after evidence arrives. The judge denied Redline's emergency relief. Northstar finalized the award 3 days later. $92 million a year. Cold chain medical distribution across 12 core lanes, with expansion after compliance review. Not because I was wronged. Not because a lane felt bad. Because Blue Ridge delivered clean performance while Redline delivered excuses. The first week under the new contract, I was back at a dispatch board before sunrise. Smaller room. Fewer screens. Better coffee. Drivers checked route packets while Anita built recovery options for weather near Little Rock. Denise took Atlanta. Carl took Dallas. Victor volunteered for St. Louis after I promised no winter surprises without his approval. Nobody cheered. Freight people do not celebrate too loudly. We still had product to move. Redline started shrinking fast. Losing Northstar exposed every weak beam. Their lender reviewed the credit line. Their cargo insurer raised premiums. Recruiting bonuses drained cash. 2 smaller medical clients paused renewals. Preston gave one last town hall about temporary market headwinds. Drivers know headwinds. They also know when someone is lying into a microphone. 8 months after the award, Redline Meridian Logistics filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The filing listed secured debt, disputed customer claims, equipment lease obligations, and declining revenue after loss of key customer. Legal language can be cold, but sometimes cold is honest. Preston resigned before the creditors' meeting. His online profile changed within days. Transformation executive, network optimization leader, growth strategist. Corporate America has many titles for men who confuse fear with management. I did not go to the courthouse. I read the bankruptcy notice from my desk in Bartlett, then answered a call from a driver outside Nashville. Reefer alarm. Receiver delay. Tight window. Real work. We found a backup dock, logged the temperature, notified Northstar, and saved the load without drama. That felt better than watching Preston fall. A year later, Blue Ridge had 43 tractors, 60 refrigerated trailers, and driver turnover low enough that our insurer asked how we did it. I told them the truth. Pay people honestly. Listen before the warning becomes a claim. Never ask dispatch to turn a bad fact into a clean sentence. The 77 drivers were not mine. They were never Redlines either. They were professionals who followed reliability. Same as Northstar. Same as every contract worth keeping. Preston thought contracts followed companies. In logistics, contracts follow performance. They follow trust. They follow the person who answers the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning and tells the truth before the shipment becomes a lawsuit. The last time I passed Redline's old yard near Lamar Avenue, the sign was half removed. A regional carrier had bought the assets. New paint on old doors. Different logo. Same asphalt. I felt no victory rising in my chest. Just a quiet reminder. Public humiliation can end a job. It cannot erase a reputation built mile by mile. I kept the folder Human Resources gave me in my bottom drawer. Receipt marked received only. Every few months, I see it while looking for something else. It reminds me of the morning Preston thought he made an example. He did. Just not the one he intended.